Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Psych 3530, where we will be discussing some details of APA style today. Now, this is meant not to be an exhaustive discussion of APA style, but rather to be sort of a guide for hitting some of the high points, some of the most common information you'll need, the most common mistakes, the most common tips for APA style. But this cannot possibly cover all of the information about APA style and citations. For that, you'll need to look at the citation style manual. This particular lecture is based on edition 6. We are currently in edition 7, but it came out in the middle of this semester that I'm making this video. So the current information is edition 6. The things that we're going to talk about don't typically change from edition to edition. They are pretty static because they're just the basics. But if you're looking for up-to-date, complete information on APA style, I recommend you buying a copy of the 7th edition APA style manual, which should be available at your university campus bookstore or easily online through any number of resources for pretty reasonable price. They're not that expensive, maybe $20-25. You can get them maybe a little cheaper than that used, but you should be working off of the 7th edition. You can also find some online resources that are very good for more details on APA style. My favorite one is Purdue OWL. That's Purdue as in the University Purdue. Purdue, OWL, owl.edu. OWL stands for Online Writing Lab. You can just Google Purdue OWL, and the site will come up, and they have both MLA and APA style information there. So let's dive right in, and let's talk about in-text citations. So in APA style, remember you are writing a scientific paper to inform other people about the science that you have done. However, when you do that, particularly in the introduction, you have to discuss previous research. When you discuss previous research, you have to give people credit for those findings and those ideas. We do that through an in-text citation. A super simple one looks like this. We have a last name, comma, the year of publication for that paper that you're citing its findings from, in parentheses. These will occur in the body, in the text of your writing. So, for example, people remember information more accurately after a good night of sleep. Windrow 2008 would then get tacked on to the end of that sentence. So my sentence, people remember information more accurately after a good night of sleep, is a description of Windrow's finding from 2008. So this author did an experiment on sleep and memory, perhaps, published it in 2008. I'm summarizing their findings for my own purposes in my paper. But, I didn't do the experiment that found that a good night of sleep leads to accurate memory. Windrow did in 2008. So even though it's my words, I'm not quoting Windrow, I'm summarizing Windrow. Even though it's my words, they're not my ideas. They're not my findings. They are Windrow's findings. And so I need to give credit to Windrow for that research. We don't underline or bold anything. It's just normal text. And you have to cite every time you use information from that source. So if we're going to talk about Windrow for, a full paragraph, we might need to cite Windrow 2 or 3 times in that paragraph as we continue to use information from that paper. Now, if I'm maybe providing an analysis of Windrow or a critique of Windrow or a comparison of Windrow, then that content is my content, right? My critique of Windrow are my ideas, and so I don't need to cite that. What I need to cite are Windrow's ideas and Windrow's findings, but my discussion or analysis of Windrow's findings are my ideas, and I don't need to cite that. Here's the page number. Again, this is probably outdated from the 6th edition to the 7th edition. Okay. Papers that we cite can, in their most simple form, have a single author, one author, and so it looks like this. The author's last name, comma, the year of publication. If we are using a parenthetical citation at the end of this statement. So peers become a major influence in a person's life during adolescence. Burnt found that in 1999. So that's one way that we can use the citation. Another way is to actually embed Burnt 1999 into the language of the sentence. So Burnt 1999 found that peers become a major influence in a person's life during adolescence. In this first example, Burnt and the year sort of fall outside of my prose, of my language, of my writing. In this second example, Burnt and their name is actually a part of my prose, a part of my sentence. So I only put parentheses around the year of publication, not the last name, because this last name is actually in my sentence. Now, obviously, not all papers are written by a single person. So this is what it looks like when you have two authors. In a parenthetical citation, we separate them with an ampersand. In a non-parenthetical, or what I like to call a prose citation, we separate them with the word and, because they are in the sentence. One thing that you don't want to do, or one conclusion that you don't want to draw from this example, is that the names should be listed alphabetically. That is not the case. We do not list authors on a single publication alphabetically. We list them by order of authorship, because in APA style, order of authorship matters. So, for example, in this Burmeister and Furman 1986, because Burmeister comes first, we actually know that they did more of the work. This paper that was published in 1986 was more from their efforts than it was from Furman's efforts. Furman is the second author because they did less work. So order of authorship actually conveys meaning in APA style in psychology, and so we want to keep it that way. When we cite them, we keep order of authorship regardless of alphabetization. Now, in some disciplines, particularly disciplines where papers could have 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 authors. These are things like genetics, astrophysics, often mathematics have tons and tons of authors. They do list them alphabetically, because if you've got 70 people on a paper, it doesn't matter. Order of authorship becomes meaningless. So they just list everyone alphabetically. But in the behavioral sciences, and typically in the medical sciences, order of authorship does matter. Okay, when we have more than two authors, things get a little more complicated. So maintaining a platonic cross-sex friendship is often viewed as desirable. Mesman, Canary, both separated by commas. And then prior to our final author, we use the ampersand, the final author's last name, comma, year. That's in a parenthetical citation. In a prose citation, we do the same thing. We just replace the ampersand with and. But then, when we have three or more authors, every single time that we cite them after the first citation, so the first citation, we list all the authors' last names. But if we cite them again later on, perhaps in our introduction or discussion, then we use this little term, this little Latin term, et al, that actually is an abbreviation for and others. And it's just to cut down on needing to list all of these people out every time. It gets a little superfluous and unnecessary. So we just say the first author, Messman, and everybody else, right, and others, year 2000. Now, if you have 6 or more authors, then you go straight to et al. even at the first citation, right? We don't need to sit here and list out 7, 8, 9, 10 authors. Just go straight to et al. The first time. Oftentimes, you might make a very general statement that has multiple sources of support. So here we have a statement: in some studies, children with higher quality friendships show higher self-esteem. I'm even mentioning here in the introduction to the sentence, in some studies, meaning more than one study. And so I want to cite all of those studies. So here we see the first citation, Dubois and Ullman, 1989. Then we have a semicolon, and that semicolon is my separation from Article 1 to Article 2, Townsend, McCracken, and Wilton, 1988. So we use the semicolon to separate our two articles, and all of our previous rules apply for how to cite each of these articles individually. Now, alphabetizing does come into play, because when we have multiple citations within the same parenthetical citation, we do alphabetize them by the first author's last name. So Dubois comes before Townsend because D comes before T in the alphabet. So if we put it all together, we could get a paragraph like this that reads very clearly and is very obvious about when and where we are pulling information from other people. And notice how this style of citation allows you to just weave things sort of seamlessly into the discussion, and that we're talking about the ideas, right? So take a minute, read this paragraph, and notice we talk about an idea and then we provide the citation. We talk about an idea, we provide the citation. We talk about a detail, we provide the citation. We're not talking about the people. We're not talking about the articles. We're not saying an article published in 1987 found that, right? But we don't want to talk about the articles or the authors. We want to talk about the ideas and the topics and the findings. So take a minute, read this paragraph, and digest it for sort of how it flows. Okay, let's move on. What do we do about numbers? So if a number is 10 or greater, we use digits to express it. So 13, 62 in numbers. We use words to express numbers that are 9 or less, right? Less than 10. Now we use all numbers in the entire method section. So even if it was 8 or 3 or 2 or 4, if we're in the method section, we use digits. Except in the case when a number starts a sentence. When a number starts a sentence, we spell it out always. So we use words to express any number that begins a sentence or a heading, and as well as common fractions like 1/3, 1/5, 1/4. And of course, like I said above, numbers less than 10. We don't like contractions. Say do not, don't say don't. Don't is technically informal, and we want to remove that contraction. We want to write about previous research in the past tense. Don't write about it in the present tense. Don't use authors' first names or titles. No Mr., Mrs., Doctor. It doesn't matter. Remember, we're not talking about people. We're talking about ideas. Some linguistic ideas about formality. Don't say since or as, right? Say because. That's what those words are. That's what you're actually trying to say with those words. Don't say while, right? Say although. When that's what you mean. Since, as, and while actually refer to the passage of time. And so that their usage is actually confusing. So if you mean because, use because. If you mean although, use although. If you're referring to the passage of time, then use since or while. Oops, sorry about that. That's a little funky. I'll make sure this is fixed for the actual static PowerPoints. Sorry about this. We're just going to kind of read through this heading here. We don't want to start sentences with but or because. And then we want to avoid the words said and wrote. Again, right? If we say like, Johnson said, or Dr. Franklin wrote, right? We're talking about the people. We're not talking about the findings. We want to say things like reported, stated, found, indicated, because that turns us towards the finding itself, the outcome, the topic. We want to avoid that word prove, right? We never prove anything. We support or provide evidence for. We don't want to use quotations. I would say you should try to use 0 quotations. We want to paraphrase. And we do not write in the first person. No I, me, or we. Use third person, singular, or plural as appropriate. Or just try and avoid writing about yourself in general. Okay, some common plurality mistakes. Data is a plural word. The singular is datum. So these data indicate, not this data indicates, right? If you're using the word data, it's plural, so we have to pluralize the words around it. Criteria is plural. Criterion is the singular. Phenomena is plural. Phenomenon is singular. Stimuli is plural. Stimulus is singular. Hypothesis is plural, or I'm sorry, hypotheses with an E on the end is plural. Hypothesis with an I on the end is singular. Just make sure you keep those in mind. These are common words that we're going to use when we talk about science, and they're words that have common plurality mistakes associated with them. Avoiding redundancy and inappropriate word choice. So let's look at these examples here on the left. Which words can be omitted from these phrases? Right? All of the 4 different groups saw. That's just so wordy, right? All you can say, just 4 different groups saw. That's it. You can just eliminate these first 3 words. Or you can say all 4 groups saw. But really, you don't even need these first 3 words. Absolutely essential, right? Those kind of mean the same thing. Get rid of one of them. Has been previously found. So this is too wordy. Just say previously found, or was previously found, or as previously found. One and the same, right? Just say the same. Summarize briefly. That's what summarize means. It means briefly. Just say summarize. The reason is because, right? Obviously just wordy. The reason is. So just be careful. In APA style, we want our language to be concise. We don't want unnecessary words and terms because they make things confusing and difficult to understand. And here we see our plurality mistakes, sort of some examples over here. So take a look through those plurality mistakes just to sort of familiarize yourself with them again. Okay, a big one is the distinction between active and passive voice. Active voice means that the activity of the sentence moves down the sentence from the beginning to the end, such that in active voice, the sentence is structured as subject, verb, object, right? Your classic sentence. Something does something to something else. Researchers conducted a study of elementary school teachers. Subject, researchers, did something, conducted a study of elementary school teachers, right? The object. This sentence structure puts the emphasis on the subject versus a passive voice sentence a study was conducted of elementary school teachers, right? So a study was conducted. This is not clear. It's not concise. It's not active. And it's not clear who did this study, right? We don't really have a subject. A study was conducted. There's no action here, right? The study does not conduct itself, right? The researchers, conduct a study of elementary school teachers. So see if you can identify these three examples, whether they are active or passive voice. Teachers conducted a pilot study addressing the validity of the tax exam. A study was conducted of job satisfaction and turnover. The survey instrument will be administered by the school administrators. So our first one is active, and our second two are passive. We want to change, so instead of a study was conducted of job satisfaction and turnover, reword this to maybe, Bronson and Griffin's 2019 conducted a study of job satisfaction and turnover. We need that subject there. And the survey instrument will be administered by the school administrators. In addition to being, we can see here that passive voice makes this unnecessarily wordy. Just say the school administrators will administer the survey instrument. Right? This is much more direct, much more clear. Subject, verb, object. Sorry about that. Some general rules. Again, I think we mentioned it before. No first names, only last names. No, we don't want to discuss the articles themselves. Don't say, in an article titled, quote, right, blah, 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 the title of the article. We don't care about the article. We care about the ideas of the article. Don't refer directly to the article. We don't bold or underline for emphasis. We bold and underline for things like organization, like section headings and subheadings. We don't bold or underline in our prose and our text just for emphasis. We want to make sure we cite each time we use information from a source. And we want to remember our rule here about citing more than one article at a time. They have to go in alphabetical order. Okay. The next few slides are just some examples of like appropriate citation. For example, here, punctuation. So you can take a look at this in the static slides. Focus on the difference between the word and the ampersand. Whether or not we list all articles or say at all. And then the ordering of citations within a multiple parenthetical citation based upon alphabetical order. And here is an example of taking not a great sentence, technically like correct, but could be better sentence that you might find in an introduction section, and then making it better and then making it best. So let's just sort of compare and contrast these. Notice that we're getting actually shorter each time, right? We're getting more concise. And usually that means we're getting more clear because scientific writing is all about being clear, concise, and straightforward. So all of this wordiness up here with this first example eventually gets reduced to a much shorter sentence, but this shorter sentence is actually much better at conveying the information we want to convey. So take a look at this as well in the static slides and use it as sort of a guide for any APA style writing that you have to do. That's it for APA style. Thanks for listening in, and I will talk to you next time.